Ready here?
Hi. Good morning. Welcome to the Current Veterans History Project. I'm Vanessa.
Oh, I'm Jackie. I'm Victoria.
Can you please state your first
Are
and
you
last
all
name?
seniors?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you please state your first and last name? And spell it, please.
What's that?
Can you please state your first and last name and spell it?
Yeah, the first name is Jordan, Jordan. The last name is spelled Eliades.
Can you please state your birthday?
What's that?
Can you please state your birthday?
12/20/22.
What branch of service were you involved with?
I'm sorry.
What branch of service were you
Oh, I
involved
was
with?
in the Air Force.
Air Force. What was your rank and what war did you serve in?
I was second lieutenant. I
Well-
retired a first lieutenant, but when I went in, I was a second lieutenant.
What war did you serve in?
World War II. Oh, don't ask me that question. I had a student in my advanced algebra class one day asked me if I was in the war, and I says yes. He wanted to know if I was in World War One. I hope you people are better off than they are. Oh, she was really, she was embarrassed.
Jogging your memory, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was in, no. I signed up in 1943 in Sacramento. I was called in the service in January of 1943.
Why did you enlist?
What's that?
Why did you enlist?
Why did I enlist?
Yeah, why did you enlist?
We were going to war. That's why I enlisted. Everybody was going to war. We had the situation in Hawaii, but when the USA stated that they were going to war against Germany, that's when I enlisted.
So you just wanted
That
to
was
help
later
out?
on.
Yeah. Where were you living when you enlisted?
What's that?
Where were you living when you enlisted?
I was going to school at University of Nevada in Reno. I was a sophomore in college when I enlisted.
Do you recall the first days of service?
Come again?
Do you recall the first days of service?
Try that again.
Do you remember what it was like when you first enlisted? Your initial days in the service?
When I first went in the service?
Yeah.
Well, why don't I give her a rundown and maybe she'll
I think that's
answer
a good
some of
idea.
her questions. Would that help her?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was inducted in the 2nd of January 1943. They sent me to Fresno, California for what we call boot camp. Everyone had to do that. I spent 30 days there. Then from there I went to Santa Ana, California. That was what we call pre-flight. I left there and went to Tucson, Arizona. And there we call that primary. When you went in the service and you planned to fly, first you had to learn how to fly, and we learned how to fly at Tucson. Then from there I came to Minner Field, here in Bakersfield. I was a cadet here at Minner Field. That was in 1944. And then from there, we were sent to Phoenix, Arizona. That was the final training was at Phoenix, Arizona. That's where we were commissioned after we finished our program. Now, maybe I'm giving you too much information. I don't know.
You're fine.
So all I'm telling you is, for me, before I was commissioned, I had to go to primary, which was at Tucson, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I learned to fly. I had never flown before. I had to learn to fly there. I won't talk about the airplanes. That'll make it too much of a deal. And then from there, I came to Minter Field here in Bakersfield. I was a cadet here. And from there we went to Phoenix, Arizona, Luke Field, and that was the last part of our training. And there I was commissioned. Now I'm going to go down the line with you. Then they took a few of us and sent us to Randolph Field, Texas, which is in San Antonio. And we went to an instructor school. And I was there for 1 month. I came back to Minter Field after that, and I instructed cadets. In other words, I came through there as a cadet, and then when I finished and went to San Antonio, then I was sent back here and I instructed cadets. I don't remember how long it was. It was a short period of time. Anyway, I signed up to go overseas. In other words, they put a deal on there. Do you want to go overseas? Yeah, we want to go overseas. So I signed up. I don't know that I have to be specific, because all I can say with you, you don't know the airplanes that I'm talking about. I trained in a P-40, which was a single engine plane. I trained in P-40. When we landed in England, we went by boat. I went to a place called Gox Hill. Gox Hill, Goxhill. It's all one word. And there where we went, whenever a fighter group wanted some replacements, some people got shot down or got killed or something like that, they came there. So from there, we didn't know where we were going to go. I ended up going to the 55th Fighter Group. And my job was escorting B-17s over Germany.
So you escorted bombers?
B-17s are bombers, that's right. They're 4-engine bombers. And we would escort them to Germany. And we flew roughly 1,000 to 1,500 feet above the bombers. We would circle above the bombers in case any German fighters would come. Mm-hmm. Then we would. That was our job. But we escorted them. And then when they finished the bombing in Germany, we came back, and when we felt that they were in friendly territory, then we went back and strafed. Now strafe means you come right down on the ground and you strafe anything on the ground. So what we did, we used to strafe airfields. We'd go to German airfields, and there would be planes down there on the ground, and then we would strafe them. And when you strafe, you come down within 100 feet of the whatever you're strafing, and then this basically what we did every time we went on a mission.
Do you remember any exciting experiences you had?
Yeah, I got into combat with a German, what they call an ME-109, and I shot the plane down. That was the only time that I had any air-to-air combat with a German plane. In all the times that I went on missions, and I can't tell you how many missions I must have gone on. I went to the fighter group in the early part of September. And your seniors, if you're taking a history class, they got maps up there on the wall, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
All right. We were supposed to strafe on the Rhine River, R-H-I-N-E. If you follow the Rhine River in Germany goes north and south, and at the top it turns and goes towards the west, and it empties into what we call the English Channel. The English, if you look on the map, the English Channel separates Europe, the main part of Europe, with England. And that day we had trouble getting down low enough so we could strafe on the Rhine River. Well, when we got down to the bottom, our leader says, okay, we're ready, we're going to go home. So we got into what we call close formation. Close formation with you four people would be, if you were the leader, there would be two people in front and one people in back. And he says, we're going home. During that period of time, where we went down was Holland. It's not called Holland anymore, it's called the Netherlands. Maybe you have, I don't know how much history you have done from that standpoint. But we were on our way home and we went right over a flak battery. Now what I mean about a flak battery means it's anti-aircraft. They try to shoot you down from the ground. In other words, when the bombers used to go over the target, in Germany, they had anti-aircraft. They would fire at those. They'd fire at those bombers, and if they were even when those bombers were up around 20,000 feet, they'd fire at those bombers. Well, anyway, we went right over a flak battery, and it was unfortunate for me because I got hit, and my plane started sputtering on me, and I was down real low. I was down under 1,000 feet. And I know I had to parachute out of the airplane, so I had enough speed that I pulled up, rolled over, and I jumped out, and parachute opened. And the next thing I remember was it was windy that day, and the wind caught my parachute and dragged me into a ditch, which was water. And when I finally came to, there was a German soldier up there pointing a gun at me. And he wanted me to put my hands up in the air. And I won't go into any detail. They took me to an interrogation place, and eventually I was taken to a prison camp. I went to that prison camp in the latter part of December. The latter part of November, early part of December. We were not liberated by the Americans. That if you are interested enough, and you go to your history class or whatever, if they have a map of Germany, and it's really detailed, find Berlin on the map. That's the capital. Go directly north of Berlin, and you'll go to a point where there's an apex like this. There's a little town of Barth, B-A-R-T-H. That's where the prison camp was. It was at Barth, Germany. Students always ask me, were you abused? No, not at all. Not in Germany. I think when you go to a movie and you see the movies where they were in the Asiatic theater, Japan, and they were abused and stuff, that never happened in Germany.
You were just interrogated?
What's that?
You were just interrogated? They just asked you questions?
What's that?
They just asked you questions?
Oh yeah, they at the interrogation camp they asked me questions, and all you had to do is tell them your rank and your service. That's all. Mm-hmm. They ask you questions about, well, you're not supposed to answer those questions. You're only just supposed to give name, rank, and serial number. That's all. Mm-hmm. And that I was only there in interrogation camp for about 1 month, and then they put me on a train and they shipped me to Barth, and that's where we were, at Barth, Germany. It was a compound for nothing but air people. In other words, anybody that went there either was on a bomber or on a fighter, like I was. I was on a fighter, single engine. I flew P-51s. It's a single engine. I'm in there by myself. That's a P-51. I'm talking about airplanes that you might not be familiar with. Mm-hmm. But we were there from that period, which was probably the early part of December, and we weren't liberated by the Americans. We were liberated by the Russians. Now I'm giving you some history. The Americans landed in France to begin with, and they worked their way through France and worked themselves into Germany. And for some reason, the Americans, who could have got to us much earlier than the Russians, there was an agreement that the Americans would only go so far and the Russians would come to Berlin. I don't know what I can say. The food wasn't special. One of the main items that we ate, potatoes. We always had potatoes. And we had bread. And now don't get alarmed. We had horse meat. You know, when you're hungry, young ladies, horse meat doesn't taste all that bad. But anyway, we were liberated in May of 1945 by the Russians. And what happened then was the Americans flew B-17s into Barth. There was an airfield there. And that's the way all of us were taken out of there, and we were taken to a camp in France. This, of course, the Germans had already given up, and the war in Europe basically was over with. I got back to Virginia on 4th of July 1945. I went home for a 2-week leave, and then we were sent to Santa Monica, California. And the reason we were sent to Santa Monica, California, we were going to be reassigned to the Asiatic theater. There were still war going on in the Asiatic theater, when even though Germany had given up, there were still war over there. So we were getting ready to be reassigned to the Asiatic theater. And we didn't know when we were going to go or anything. I don't know how much you youngsters understand about World War II. But in August of 1945, we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. One was for Nagasaki, and the other one was Yokohama. And once we dropped those 2 bombs, the war was over with. They called it quits. I don't know whether you youngsters in your history, do you have a history class?
We did last year, yeah.
Do you remember them talking about dropping the 2 bombs
Yeah.
in August of 1945? I've talked to many students because I was in the service and what it was like over there and how we were where we abused and stuff like that. And I had some students say, why did we drop those 2 bombs on Japan? Well, if we had to invade Japan, if the Americans had to invade Japan, we don't know how many casualties we would have had. Now, when you say casualties, we're talking about how many people were going to get killed.
Yeah.
You're not going to go into that country and just say, we're going to take over. You're going to have to fight probably street by street and house by house and that type of thing. So, from my standpoint, I thought it was the right thing to do. But there are some students ask me, and they want to know, why did we drop the 2 bombs? Because we killed a lot of people. I don't really remember how many thousand people were killed by dropping those 2 bombs. And they aren't, those bombs that they dropped there are nothing compared to the bombs that they can drop now.
Yes.
They're bad enough, but the ones that they can drop now must be 10 times larger and more effective. And you people have to understand, we got a situation in the Middle East, especially with Iran, where they want to they want to make an atomic problem, and we're fighting them, and there's other countries fighting them, and so on. You're young. I really don't know whether we're ever going to be in a conflict over there or not. I don't know. We have soldiers in Afghanistan. We in Afghanistan, and I see in the paper here just the other day, the boy that got hurt, I think injured, was a Bakersfield High School boy, and I understand he's back in town if the papers are correct, and so on. So for me, when I was flying over Germany, I was only 22 years old. I mean, you don't fight a war with old people. You fight a war with young people. And some of them aren't going to come back. That's just the way war is. I hope I have given you some kind of an idea of what it was like for me, because I was inducted when I was in my early 20s, and by the time I was flying over there, I remember the first mission I was on, and I thought, holy mackerel, there's no friends down there. We're flying over Germany, and we used to fly around 24,000 feet. But we always were above the bombers. The bombers were around 21, 22. We always flew above the bombers. We'd escort them to the target. Then they would turn and go back, and we would follow them back to where they felt that they were in friendly territory. Then we would turn around and go back and strafe, like I told you.
Yes.
But mainly, we strafed airfields is what we did.
While you were overseas, did you get injured at all?
Did I what?
Did you get injured at all overseas?
No, I was never injured. When I bailed out of the airplane, I hit the ground. It was windy. It was all I could remember. The moment I hit, I felt my knees come clear up into my face, but I wasn't injured. Luckily, I wasn't injured. And we had, just like I said, the food was basically was enough to keep us going. You know, they didn't have very much to go on, but I remember basically the potatoes, the bread, and the other, and I don't know. We got by. Occasionally, we used to get a Red Cross parcels, even in prison camp. Had a little box, maybe about that big, and it had a little bit of everything. And people that smoked thought it was great. I think they had Lucky Strikes and Chesterfields. I never cared to smoke. I still don't smoke today, and I hope you young ladies don't ever get in the habit. I don't know what anyone can say to you. My wife we were married. My wife and I were married for 64 years. When I first married her, she didn't smoke until she got to college. But when she joined a sorority, all the gals were having a cigarette. That was a big deal. So she started smoking. And I remember at the time, when I would go get groceries, I always had to make sure that I got some Lucky Strikes for my wife. Well, anyway, I want to make this very clear to you. She started falling on me in the front room. She fell once, she fell twice. I said, we got to get you to a doctor. She didn't want to go. I said, we're going to go to a doctor. Well, they finally found out there are two main arteries that go to your head. They're the carotid arteries. And when they checked, they were partially blocked, and that's why she was passing out. And the doctor told her, if you quit smoking, then probably everything will be okay. And she did. She quit. She said it was awful hard. I'll tell you, it was awful hard. You know, once you get smoking, and you probably know people that smoke and so on, they talk about drugs and so on. That's bad enough. But smoking to me is just like a drug. There's just so many people that they smoke, and eventually those lungs, they've had it. So anything that I can tell you, and I've gone and just like drugs on the street, don't you ever think that you're not going to have a chance to take those drugs. I came from a small town in eastern Nevada. We probably had maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people in that little town. It was a company town, and so on. But it was different there. But when I got to college, I met a lot of different people, and the kind of people that we're having a discussion. The kind of people that it just, everybody knew everybody. Everyone knew everyone in a small town, you know. It could be like that. And when I got to college, then it was completely different. It really was. I mean, I joined a fraternity, and we used to have what they call beer busts occasionally. And you'd have a couple of beers and so on. That's no big deal. But we always had 2 or 3 that we had to haul them home because they drank so much beer. But when you girls leave that high school, and if you go to college and you join a sorority, it's going to be a different ballgame. You're going to meet different people. They're going to have different ideas. That's something that you're going to be judged. Look at this youngster from Garces High School. I know exactly what that boy went through, because when I joined the fraternity, we had to paint the fraternity. A lot of things. We were pledges, so we had to do a lot of crazy things, but nothing like what happened to him. They got drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking. And yesterday's paper, by law, 0.08, you're drunk. Mm-hmm. That's by law. You're driving a car and you're drinking, and they check you, and if you're over 0.08, then they feel that you're you're beyond that point. But anyway, his was .30. Now, if you're a mathematician, and I taught math all those years at North High School, I taught all levels of math from Algebra 1 to pre-calculus. .08 means 0.08. .30 is more than 3 times that. And that kid, you know, I guess had a problem and finally died. I'm only throwing this out because every one of you is going to be exposed to the one time. I don't care. Somewhere along the way, someone is going to say, "Oh, have a little smoke or whatever," or have a. It's okay to drink. I mean, you know, it's social. You know, I don't think I've ever been drunk in my life, and I know that having a little drink once in a while is okay. My wife and I used to always have a little wine before dinner. Boy, I thought that was great. And the reason I say that is when back at home, my dad made wine. We had wine shipped in from Fresno, from grapes, and he made the wine. And as strict as my mother was, I'll never forget this. We come to the table. I couldn't have been more than 8, 9, 10 years old, and they'd give me a little glass about that much wine in it, and have me have some wine. And that's the way they did it in Greece before they came here. They came from Greece, and that's the way it was. I can still talk the Greek, but I can't find many people that can speak Greek. I went to this Greek function where they have the deal, you know, where they raise money for it. And I finally found a woman that could speak Greek to me. And I went to a Greek, and I figured I could, but I didn't. I don't have a chance to talk to many people. You people know Jerry Collis? You ever heard of Jerry Collis?
No.
No, he coached at the junior college. Anyway, he can speak Greek, and when I see him, we can speak with each other. And of course, when I used to talk to my mother, when I came here and I talked to my mother on the phone, she remained there. It was always in Greek, and every once in a while I'd have to ask her. I'd kind of forget about what that was, and then she says, "You mean to tell me you forgot that?" Yeah, I forgot that. I'm sorry. But I don't know. I want you to understand, I have lived a lifetime. The day that I have to go, there's no question, I will be 90 in December. When I was a youngster in that little town of McGill, when the people got around 55 or 60, they were on their way out the door. I mean, that's the way it was. But now, you go to a paper and you look in the paper and obituary, you see some people that are over 100. Mm-hmm. I belong to a club here in town, and one of the guys has a locker right next to me. We can go and work out at the club, but he's 102 years old.
Wow.
And I'll never forget the one day, I had never met him. He was right next to me, and his name is Lou Kirker. And I got to meet him, and we were talking and everything else. And when I left, he says, "Okay, kiddo, I'll see you." And he was calling me kiddo. I says, I was 80 years old, and he was calling me kiddo, and I thought, what the hell's going on in the world? So finally, the next time I went back, we were working out together, doing various things. And I said, "Lou, how old are you?" At that time he was in his 90s. And then I could understand why he called me kiddo. I look at you three young ones and holy mackerel. My wife lived to be, my life when she passed away, my wife was 86 years old. So she quit the smoking, and she had a heart problem, and it was something they couldn't handle. But you know, you're very fortunate to live to be 86 years old.
Yes.
I don't know about your parents and how old they are and so on. You probably have grandparents that are probably pretty old and so on. But just like I'm sitting here telling you, and you experience all that, you've gone through all that in your lifetime, then all you can say is be careful. Use a little good judgment when some of these opportunities come up. And you're all seniors.
Yes.
You look like you should be in the 5th grade. Seniors, holy mackerel.
To kind of get back onto the war, were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah, we got air medals, and then we had clusters. We had ribbons because we were in the whenever you go to a different theater, you get a ribbon for that theater. The fact that I flew, we had a medal for the flying, and then whenever they give it an additional to that one medal, they give you what they call a cluster, and so on, which goes on to the affair. But actually, for flying, no, I didn't get any medals or do anything special or something like that. In other words, you got to understand, in a P-51, you're by yourself. You're the only. There's no one else in that plane, and you handle everything yourself. Is what it amounts to. I want you to understand that my high school coach came to Shafter, California in 1946. He was my coach in high school. You know this Lisa that's on channel, she's on channel 27. She's on CBS. Her name is Lisa Kirch. Doesn't mean much to you people, but she also graduated from White Pine High School, which was, in other words, where I grew up, it was a copper community. They mined the ore in a town called Ruth, and they shipped that ore to McGill, where we smelted it, and then made copper. That's how they made the copper. And so it was a copper community, and so on. And I don't know, it was different. All I can say to you is when I went to college, I joined a fraternity. It was like going to a different world. Because, you know, I came from a town, 5,000. Everybody knew everybody else, It was that kind of a deal. Any other questions?
During the war, how did you stay in touch with your family?
I went to North High School in is that what you're asking me?
No.
No. How did you stay in touch with your family?
Come again?
How did you stay in touch with your family?
I've got ear deals and I'm still having trouble. These are terrible. They don't work where they should. Go ahead.
How did you keep in touch with your family while you were overseas?
We were able to write letters and communicate with. I communicated with my family, and so on. I had a situation. I was a sophomore in college. My dad worked there in McGill, this town that I'm talking about, and he worked at what they call a lime quarry. He was a dynamiter. What I mean by that is, to get the stuff off the side of the hill, they had to dynamite it and bring it down. And it was his job to dynamite and try to bring that down. And what he would do is they'd go out and drill maybe 10 holes, and they would have 10 places where they'd have dynamite. And they spaced them where one would go off and then a little bit later another one would go off and so on. Well, what happened was one of them didn't go off. And normally they wait 10 or 15 minutes and then go up to investigate. And this has happened to them many times. And so it's not a big deal. But on this particular day, one didn't go off. And my dad went up to check to find out what was going on, and the darn thing went off. And it got him pretty well in here. Well, I was in school at the time, and I remember Mud Townsend. He was from Ely. That was another town that fed the same high school. He took me, and by the time I got back, my dad had died. There was a coach that came from the University of Nevada. He was my football coach. He was my basketball coach. And for some reason, in 1946, he left there and took a job at Shafter, which is just out of town. When I finished University of Nevada in Reno, I went to USC to do my graduate work and get my master's degree. So I went to USC and did my graduate. In the meantime, I would come up on Fridays because they played their games on Friday night, the football teams. And he told me when I came here that I had a job at Shafter if I wanted to come here. Well, I had a chance to go to Las Vegas. A lot of guys in the fraternity and so on. The coach at Las Vegas, there was only one high school then, was retiring. I applied for the job because Ely, you come right down through Las Vegas and then you come to Bakersfield, so it's not a big deal. Well, anyway, I applied for the job. I was in Los Angeles still going to school when I got this call from Las Vegas and they offered me the job. And I talked to my wife. I said, you know, I have a chance to go to Las Vegas and take a job at Las Vegas High School. They only had one high school. Of course, now they're like a lot of others. They've got a lot of high schools. But anyway, I eventually turned it down and accepted the job at Shafter. I went to Shafter in 1950. I was there 3 years. The principal there was a fellow by the name of Jack Hill. He was the principal that was going to take North High when it opened in 1953. North High opened in 1953. And I applied to be the football coach, and I was accepted. So I went there in 1953. Our first class basically was from Bakersfield High School. The freshmen and sophomores at Bakersfield came to North High School automatically. And then, of course, we were there a year. Then we had North High kids, freshmen and so on, and built up to. That's the way they do with all these new schools. Mm-hmm. They start out with freshmen and sophomores, and then they get students from other schools and so on. But I know with North High, the freshman and sophomore class were basically from Bakersfield High School. Mm-hmm. They just moved over. And anyway, you know, then I retired in 1985. So I was there a long time. Any more questions?
Yes.
And don't be afraid to speak a little bit louder. You're a nice young lady, and you speak in those nice, soft tones. Go ahead.
Do you recall the day your service ended, and where were you?
What's that again?
Do you recall the day your service ended, and where were you?
I was what in the service?
Do you recall the day your service ended, and where were you at?
Oh, gosh, I'm terrible.
Let me check in.
These darn things supposed to be pretty good, but they're not.
Do you recall the day your service ended, and where were you at?
You mean in
of the Air Force when it ended?
When it ended,
Do you remember, like when?
well, when it,
The day?
in other words, you got to remember I was in prison camp.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And I was there from, let's see, it would have to be from December to, let's see, we were liberated in May of 1945 from the prison camp. And I told you how they flew us and they brought us, and I didn't go through all the particulars and so on. That there's too much detail involved. But now, I don't think I answered your question.
You're fine. Do you want to switch real quick? Yeah. So, my turn to ask questions. When you arrived home, who was the first person or people that you saw?
North High?
When you arrived home, like at home after everything was over,
Oh,
who was the first person or people that you saw?
I went to see my mother. We took the bus from Salt Lake City to McGill. And the first thing I did is head home.
Oh.
You got to understand, when I didn't go into this. My dad got killed. My dad got killed in 43, I guess, yeah, it would be 43. My mother, she was just a home mother. My parents came from Greece in 1917 to this country. At the time when my dad died, I had 3 sisters. No, excuse me, I had 2 sisters and 3 brothers. And I went in the service the following January. I didn't apply to stay there. I felt I had to go to war. That's all it was to it. So I enlisted. My mother, what she did, she took a job with the company, cleaning out offices in the evening, washing dishes at the boarding house. She worked long enough that she retired from the company. To retire from the company, she had to work over 20 years for the company, and she finally retired from the company. So it was something. I don't think you people know something like this. This happened before you were even born. When the war was over there in Japan, the Americans didn't understand the atomic, they dropped the atomic bombs, but they didn't understand the problem with an atomic bomb. Outside of Las Vegas, I don't remember the name of the town, they were firing atomic bombs above the ground. But they weren't large ones like they have over there. They were smaller ones. The prevailing winds took that through the town of McGill, Ely, and all those, White Pine County. I'm trying to think. What is the problem? It's happening in Japan right now. They're worried about the leakage of, what word am I looking for?
Radioactivity?
What?
The radioactivity?
The radiation.
Radiation.
That went right through White Pine County. And we didn't know anything about it. I don't think the government knew much about it. This is way before your time. The sheep people in Utah got up one morning to go out to do whatever they do with the sheep, and all the sheep were dead. All the sheep were dead. And the radiation had gone right through White Pine County and gone into Utah. Both of my sisters died of cancer. My 3 brothers died of cancer. At that time, the government didn't understand radiation and what it could do. There were so many people coming down with cancer after this happened. So what really happened, the government admitted that they were at fault. The only thing I remember is my sister's husband, Helen's husband, the brothers. They applied for this, and the government gave them $50,000 if they came down with a certain cancer, and they lived in the town of McGill. There was 2 days. If they were there those 2 days, they could apply for the $50,000. Well, $50,000 is a joke when you lose your life, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But that's the way the government handled it. But they didn't understand the real problem of radiation. That's the trouble they're having over there in Japan. You know, they had the breakage there at one of their atomic plants, and their main concern was not to get the leakage of this radiation and create a problem for the people. And they seem to have it under control, whatever they've done. I know that. So that's a real problem. The Russians had the same problem long time ago. They don't talk about that anymore. But they had that. It was so severe over there. Within a certain period of time, you couldn't even put in crops or anything because the radiation was so bad. And I don't remember the name of that place, and I don't hear too much about it, but it happened a long time ago. That happened to the Russians they had the same problem. I know that in our country, we have a plant down there south of San Diego. I think you people know that. And that's their concern. They were having a little bit of trouble here a while back, but it doesn't sound like it was anything like that. Had to do with the water or whatever it was, that I don't know. And, you know, there's such a fear of atomic energy in this country. You realize in towns like Germany and France, you know how they get their energy? They have atomic plants. They have atomic plants. And I don't know. That's a problem the government has to worry about. I don't know.
Did you make any close friends while you were in the service?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. You make close friends.
Did you continue those friendships?
You see, when you ask me a question like that,
You're okay.
There's a fella that graduated from East High School. He was older than I was. He was 4 years older than I was. He was married, didn't have any children. His name was Kenny Dodenhoff. I graduated from high school in 1940. He graduated in 1936. We went through everything together. We got to be really, really good friends. We met at Santa Ana. We went through primary. We went through basic. We went through advanced. We went to Texas. All the time we were together. When we came here, we said that if we have a chance to go overseas, you know, we're going to go together. Okay. When the sheet was put on the board, I signed up. He didn't sign up. I says, Kenny, what's the deal? I thought we were going to go together. Well, he said, my wife and I talked it over, and why don't we just stay here? The war will be over. They were instructing cadets out here in Minter Field. They had nothing to do with the war. They were just instructing cadets that were going to go on. Well, what happened was, while I was in prison camp, and I didn't know this, the government they discontinued cadet program. No more cadets. All the officers that were out there that were instructors had to go in some phase of flying. Kenny Dodenhoff ended up flying a cargo plane from India, over the Indian. What's the pass over that India? You had to come over. Which? Oh, I can't think of it. I can't think of the name of the mountains. But anyway, that's what he did. Well, they don't know what happened. He got killed. I didn't know this until I got back from overseas. His wife, we were real good friends because of Kenny. She called me. I was home on the 2-week leave after I got back from prison camp. And she called me up and she wanted me to come to Bakersfield. And I came to Bakersfield to go with her out to Minterfield and get all the papers taken care of. He was one of only one close friend. After I left here, I got friendly. You run into a guy that does the things that you do, you get real good friends. You're in the service. Every guy that's ever been in the service is going to have a group of good friends. You're going to have a group of guys that you're going to be friendly with and so on. This fellow was named Jim Leake. I'm going to make this. When we went overseas, we went on the boat together. Jim went with me. We trained in P-40s, like I told you, and then eventually we were sent overseas. Well, when we went to Gox Hill, the place that I told you, the fighter group that I was, the 350 fighter group, they wanted 4 guys. So I felt that Leake was going to go with me. Well, I ended up going with Crambo and Maxwell and Who was the other guy? I don't remember the other guy. Jim Leake didn't go with me. I said, Jim, I thought we were going to go together. He ended up going to a different fighter group. When I got to the fighter group, before they would let you go on a mission, you had to go up with one of the experienced people that was there at that base, and we do maneuvers and stuff like that. And when you come down, okay, you guys are all ready. Everything's okay. I could go on the next mission. But you had to be checked out by somebody there. I knew where he went, so I got a hold of a small plane, and we flew to this plane. It wasn't very far away, and checked. We don't know what happened. When they were going up and doing all these maneuvers, like we were and doing a lot of maneuvers, they don't know what happened. He went all the way in and got killed. They don't know whether he blacked out or what. They don't know what happened. And of course, those are 2 guys that trained with me, and both of them got killed. And then, of course, in that barracks that I lived in the base over there when we were in England flying the missions and so on, there were 15 of us that lived in this one barracks. And to my knowledge, they're all gone. In other words, you live too long. You know, I remember one day my wife says to me, she says, you know, it's not the same anymore. I said, what do you mean, Cookie? Her name was Cook. We called her Cookie. She says, you know, all our friends are beginning to die, you know, and you know, we had a lot of friends here in town and so on. But, you know, you're talking to a person that's lived a lifetime, seen a lot of things, been a part of a lot of things, and so on. And I don't know. Just like I said to you here a moment ago, I'm very fortunate. I'll be, well, if I live to be 90, I'll be 90 in December, and I want to say one thing to you 3 people. And to that young man back there, you're going to live a lifetime. Somewhere in this lifetime, you have to go back to Washington. Pardon. You have to go back to Washington. You have no idea what's there. My wife and I went twice, and you just can't see everything that's back there. Pardon me.
You're okay.
But I don't know. Yeah, you get talking about some of these guys, and it's a bad deal. But I'm hoping that you three people take something away from this. You know, we talked about a lot of things, and I know it's going to happen to you down the hole. And maybe some people on the, I remember that guy talking to us about all this stuff and so on. I just hope it doesn't happen to you or whatever. One of my boys called me up the other day, and he was talking about a guy that just passed away, and they officiated baseball games. They went all over the state of California, and he was real good friends. And he didn't die of drugs. He died of alcohol. He just couldn't leave it alone, and that happens. And so, you know, if you get it from someone that's been down the road and seen it and everything else, is all you can do is pass it on to the younger ones and hope they don't go down that same road. That's about what it amounts to.
The last question. Is there anything that you would like to add on to anything we've discussed? Anything you'd like to talk about?
Well, I don't know. I pretty well explained, you know, going to school and going through the program and so on, going over there.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What interested you into being a teacher?
What's that?
What interested you in being a math teacher?
I had a math minor in college. I didn't, I don't know why I didn't get a major, but I had a math minor. And I felt real comfortable with math. I've always did pretty good with math. I remember when in grade school, I remember the superintendent of the grade school wanted to know what I planned to do when I got out of school. I said, well, I wanted to teach and I wanted to coach. He thought that was terrible. He thought I should go into engineering or something like that because I did so well with mathematics. But I don't regret it. I don't regret the teaching. I hope for all of you here, you have teachers that care for you, and are willing to meet you before school, after school, whatever, to help you out. You should have come to North High School and seen some of those sessions we used to have before a class. Holy mackerel, I'd have 15, 20 kids there. And then I'd get some of my advanced algebra kids to help, because I couldn't help them all at the same time. I'd pick out 2 or 3 that did really well for me. Now I want you to come and help me help some of the algebra one, then I'd help some of the others, you know. And pretty soon, one of the girls brought some cocoa or something to class and so on. And then one day they brought some donuts to class. This is before school now. And I said, what's going on here? Well, pretty soon these young ladies bring something, and we sit down and we'd have, you know, these were basically advanced algebra kids. The pre-calculus, I never had those. I had mostly the advanced algebra kids that would come. But I'll tell you, If any of you become teachers, I don't know. Don't you forget. You gotta make yourself available. I don't care which area you're teaching. If you have students in there that are not doing well, then you better single them out and say, I'm going to be here before school a half an hour, 45 minutes, and we're going to have a discussion and so on. And I know that some of those sessions before school were some of the nicest days I had. I still get letters from kids that were in those sessions. The last one I got, the girl was from Washington. She wanted me to, so I wrote a letter. She wrote me a letter and so on. And then I haven't heard from her for a while. I tried to call and get a hold of her. She left me a phone number, but I didn't make connections, so I really don't know what happened. But you run into them. I mean, you know, you teach at a school, let's say, as many years as I did, you're going to run into North High students that you had in class at one time or another. You're all seniors. How much math did you take? Oh, here we go.
Math
you took algebra.
Math is my worst subject.
Mine
Oh,
too.
your worst subject?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Oh, you should have known from Mr. Eliades. You should have come and got some help on the side.
I'm in advanced algebra right now.
You're taking advanced algebra now?
I'm taking Algebra 1 for extra algebra credits.
Is that right?
Yes.
And Algebra 2.
You're in algebra 2?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Good, I have a B.
Advanced algebra, of the 4 maths, even with calculus, so much of that comes back to the advanced algebra, which you had in advanced algebra. I don't care, you'll be working with calculus and so on, all that will revert back to what you did before. A lot of it. You know, I had a problem at North High School. I don't know whether you have that problem or not. You see, I go back into the 50s, so it was different in the 50s than it is now. Where you see women in a certain areas now, that wasn't the case when I went to high school, when I was teaching at North High. When I had young ladies that really were top-notch in my advanced algebra class and the pre-calculus, I encouraged them to go into engineering. I sent several, I talked to several of them. And at that time, and I don't blame the counselors, because we're talking back in the 50s and the 60s. Things have changed now. It's not the same. Anyway, the counselors discouraged him. You know why? They told him that engineering really was for boys and not for girls.
That's wrong.
But that's changed now. I mean, they finally realized you have women that are engineering. I mean, if they've got it up here, what's to prevent a woman not being able to give you the answers in terms of a boy? That doesn't make sense. And at that time, when they discouraged him, I just didn't do that anymore. But then I have a real good friend. He went to school with one of my boys, and they have a daughter, and she went to San Diego. She was top notch. I never had her in class. She came after I left there. Anyway, she got down there and did really well. They encouraged her to take an engineering deal. And she went over and she took engineering. They even got her a job when she graduated.
Wow.
And so on. She was really a top-notch gal. I like I say, I just know that she did really well at North High and so on. And then she ended up down there doing this. So I remember I made darn sure that I got her $100 bill put in put in the deal, and then I wrote her a little note telling her about what happened to me as a teacher at North High School. And finally we got a young lady that's going to take engineering, you know. But that's an open deal.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of them like that. If they're good enough, what's to prevent them?
Exactly.
Anything else?
We covered everything.
What?
We covered everything. I think we're good here.
We cover a lot of other things too.
Oh, yes.
I hope you take it from someone that's been there,
We will.
seen it all.
Are we good?
Well, young man, you haven't said very much. Do you have any questions?
Not really.
Not really. Okay.
It was great talking to you.
What's that?
I said it was great talking to you.
Well, I'm glad to be
Thank you
able
for
to
your
talk to
time.
3 young ladies. But I look at these young ones now, and they look like they should be in 4th or 5th grade. You know, you see them get out of high school, you know.
Yeah.
Gee, if you drive down and you look and you see, holy mackerel, that's a high school student. But I'm sure you run into that all the time.
Oh, yes. All the time.
Well, what do we do now?
We need you to go do your paperwork.
Oh, yes.
We have to go elsewhere.
Yes.
Oh, I got it.
Don't forget your hat.
Oh, I sit too long, I get too stiff.
Here you go.
Oh yeah, don't forget my hat. I'm pretty bad at losing the hat. Go right ahead.
Thank you.